Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today we'll be painting a transparent baby fish pattern or fish fry or whatever you want to call it. It's gonna be a transparent little baby fish. It's gonna be really cool. Alright guys, so let's begin. Now if I look at my reference picture, then I chosen a little bit of a brighter pattern with some color in it because I like to add a little bit of color in there, but still it kind of looks natural. You can also go for a natural color of fry or baby fish, of course, but I think that little bit of orange, that line in the middle, is just gonna add that little extra, that little bit of coolness in there. So we're gonna go for that one. So to start off with this pattern, I'm gonna do the green scales first. So our first color is gonna be Wicked Detail Sepia. Now because this is gonna be a transparent lure and I never tried to make a fry pattern myself yet, so this is the very first time I'm gonna try to make a very transparent baitfish looking kind of lure. But it's very important that we're gonna keep our paint as thin as possible so it becomes really transparent. So that's why we're gonna need to reduce it enough. So I take 2 drops of reducer, one drop of 40-50, and only 1 drop of paint. So it's gonna be super reduced, gonna be very saturated with 40-50 and reducer. So my paint becomes really transparent. That's really important right now. I would say it's almost better to use too much reducer instead of using too little, just to make sure that you keep that transparency. Now because we use that much reducer, keep in mind that the adhesion of this paint is not going to be terrific, because the amount of reducer that is going to create that your paint doesn't have enough glue in there because it's all reduced. It's like spraying water on there. So you're gonna need a good clear coat to clear this lure in order to sustain a little bit of damage here and there. But also when you're gonna shoot your reduced paint, make sure that your air pressure is low enough, or else you're just gonna blow out your paint over the entire thing. So I shoot about at 15 psi. I would say that I like to use high air pressures. 15 psi is still quite high, but I feel like I have more control with higher air pressures. So just be very careful now. And if we look at a reference picture, then we need to do the top of the head, the entire back, and a little bit of the tail underside as well. And the key is to put really small layers on there, or else if you put too much paint on there, it's gonna form drops, because it likes to accumulate on your lure and forms drops. So you need to put a really tiny coat on there, let it dry, put another tiny coat on there, let it dry, put another tiny coat on there, just to build up that paint, because the amount of reducer makes it so fluid that it acts like water. So now that our brown is dry, I made the same mixture with Wicked Detail Moss Green to put on the green scales. And this is just from a garlic bag. Just want to have it clamped in here together with my lure, that easy. And I hook it on the hook eye here, just like that. Don't waste any time. That's a quick fix. And then you can push it down a little. Now you can spray. Alright, so now we're gonna do the guts or intestines or inside of the baitfish. And for that we're gonna need to put on a base, and it's gonna be a little bit more opaque. It's gonna be less transparent, so it sticks out from from the transparent green and such. And to do that, we're gonna need an opaque paint like Vallejo Dead White, but we're gonna need to over reduce it a lot so it becomes very subtle, and you can layer on really subtle colors so it doesn't become too opaque. You can, if you would use regular white on there, it's not gonna look as natural, it's not gonna blend in, it's gonna stick out too much. And we want it to blend in and feel like that the intestines are on the inside of the fish and not on the outside. If you would use an opaque paint, it's gonna look like it's gonna be on the outside. And when we just reduce it a little bit so it becomes a tiny bit transparent, it becomes a little bit more blended in, if you will, it's gonna feel like it's more on the inside of the fish. That's what we're gonna try to create at least. Airbrush thinner. A good 3 drops. We're gonna start out with 1 drop of paint. We can always add more, but we cannot add less. And then let's say 2 drops of flow improver. And make sure that your air pressure is low enough. This is super important, or else you're gonna get problems. Because we're gonna spray a paint that is the consistency of water, so we need to be really careful and layer that really carefully on there. Always test spray first. So I got a little piece of paper here to my right, and I always test spray a little bit on there just to feel the consistency of the paint, see how it reacts, see how well it sprays, and how much I can build up before it starts to blow out. So now I checked my paint and I know it's really sensitive, so now I know that I have to be really careful. And also for that orange line that runs through the bait, I'm gonna put a little bit of a white base layer. Now on the body is also a little bit of a purple hue. And we're gonna recreate that with Game Air Alien Purple. So I mixed the Alien Purple with the same concussion as before. So 2 drops of thinner and 2 drops of flow improver. Mixed it really well. Make sure you got low air pressure and just carefully put a little bit on there. I'm gonna make it really uneven so it gives a little bit of a texture and it feels a little bit alive. But we're gonna have to be really careful. Now I mixed some 40-50 with Candy 2.0 Dirt Track Brown. I did a mixture of 50-50, so half Candy 2.0, half 40-50. And we're gonna put some darker accents on the head of our lure, the top of the head, and some random spots on the belly as well to push that purple that we just sprayed on there a little bit back into the background, because now it is too visible, and on our lure pattern it's not that visible because it's in the background. That's why we did this first, and now we're gonna put some darker spots and some blotches on there just to push it back to hide it a little bit. And now what I like to do to put some really tiny spots on there is to use a paintbrush. So I dip it in my paint, which is in my airbrush cup. I make sure there's not too much on there, and then I grab a toothpick and I just rub it over there. So now that our splatters are done and dry, I took a little bit of metal medium from Vallejo, mixed it with some flow improver and some thinner, and we're gonna spray that on everything that is white and also the kill plates, just to create a little bit of a pearlescent effect and push everything back into the background again. Now there was also a lot of gold on our reference picture, so for that I'm gonna use For that I'm gonna use Createx Gold Chrome. I'm just gonna spray a little bit of that here and there just to create that little bit of gold already in there. Now to make the gill plates and the gold there a little bit brighter, I'm gonna use a little bit of Vallejo Sun Yellow. Alright, now it's time to put that orange line in there. Now we need a base for that line because that white is a little bit purplish now. So in order to make it really bright orange and stick out from that lure, we'll need a good base. So I mixed some Wicked Opaque Pyro Red, which is a really nice and opaque bright orange, with some 4050 and some 4011 to reduce it. I over reduced it a little bit with 3 drops to 2 drops or something to make it, again, just like we did with the white in the beginning, to over reduce it so it doesn't become too opaque, so it blends in, but still it gives a good cover. And now we're gonna put that orange line in, and then later we're gonna go over there with a little bit of fluorescent orange just to make it as bright as possible. Right, so now to make this line even brighter, we're gonna use a little bit of Createx Fluorescent Orange. Just reduced it a tiny little bit to spray better, but not too much. And we're gonna try to follow that line and make it as bright as possible. Now if we look at a reference picture, you can see there are 2 purplish violet kind of lines underneath that orange. So we're gonna use a little bit of fluorescent violet, and we're gonna carefully underline those lines a little bit. And now for the last part, if we look at our reference picture, you see all these golden little flakes in there. It's on the scales. And we're gonna recreate that with the glue and foil from Lure Blanks. So first of all, I'm gonna put tiny amounts of glue on there. As tiny as possible. And now that our glue is dry, we're gonna grab our foil. And now I like to use a piece that I already used quite a lot, because here the pieces of foil that are still left on here are really small. So that's gonna ensure me that when I put this foil on there, it's gonna only leave tiny little pieces of gold and not really big surfaces. Because if I messed up the glue, if I made a big spot here and there somewhere, with these tiny pieces of foil, I'm not gonna cover everything. I'm gonna make sure that there are only tiny little pieces of golden foil on there. Ready for a clear coat. I also quickly wanted to show you guys the transparency of this lure, and as you can see, only the guts are not transparent, just like it would be on the real fish. So that turned out really nice. And now that the lure is finished, I am really happy with the results. It looks very realistic, very natural. It really looks like a reference picture, which I'm really glad about. Also the transparency I showed you, it is really transparent still, and that really looks like how I want it to be. Except for the guts, I feel like they're not sticking out enough, or they don't feel like they're on the inside of the lure. So I guess next time I would try to use the stencil here and make a sharp line. So by using a stencil and then spraying that white and that pearl over there so that you get a clear line here where the guts stop, it's gonna feel more like the guts are on the inside, I guess. It's something that I need to try. So that's a note to myself, and that's something that I definitely will experiment with, because I want that pattern to be perfect. But with the first try, I am really glad with the result, and this lure looks really nice. I will leave a link in the description down below for all the materials that I used to paint this lure. This will guide you to my webshop, which is based in Sweden, and if you would buy anything there, it will be supporting me at the channel. As always guys, if you got any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments down below. Or of course, if you want to share some information or tips with me and the lure painting community, you can also leave them down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, and see you next time. Bye bye.